I'm Brad Chilcote, President of Dalrock Performance Development. Let's begin with the 10 most crucial mistakes that are made in sales. These have been identified based on our success in transforming teams into world-class sales organizations throughout the past 12 years, and in over 300 industries and professions, including everything from small privately held businesses to Fortune 500 companies. By understanding these mistakes and evaluating your company and its sales force against them, you will dramatically impact your company's potential for growth. Let me ask you a few questions. Do your salespeople consistently exceed revenue goals, uphold margins, forecast accurately, report effectively and timely, generate enough new business, and consistently exceed quota? There are many organizations that grow 5 to 15% by virtue of reputation, products, and marketing. The companies that consistently experience high growth have truly unique sales organizations. Their sales team produces consistent and sustainable results year after year regardless of the economy. Their leaders understand that greatness requires a different approach and a discipline to implement the key elements required. These high-performance organizations produce great sales results and consistently grow upwards of 40% annually. What would 40% annual growth feel like for you? Consider these sobering sales statistics. Less than 10% of salespeople are capable of consistently meeting quotas. The average turnover for sales professionals is around 53% annually. 24% of salespeople will not prospect at all. Only 8% can be considered hunters, and only 1% have the full skill set. 45% will not close. Your typical sales candidate will have less than 23% of skills required for closing sales. I'm providing you this valuable information because I want to get you something that will help your small business to succeed. You see, I have a passion for helping small businesses. By helping you and your business, I'm helping our community and ultimately improving the quality of life and business success for everyone. I hope you find this information so highly usable that you will share it with other business owners so they too can increase their success. What do you suppose the number one most crucial mistake many salespeople make? They talk too much. Think about this. How do you feel about salespeople yourself? What is it that you dislike about salespeople, whether they call on you on the phone or approach you in the store? How many times do you wish that they would just leave you alone and not waste your time? Typically, people hate to be sold to, but this doesn't mean they don't love to buy. And people always base their purchase on an emotional need they have at that moment. So unless your salespeople learn what a prospect's needs are, they're wasting time. To do so, they must be empathetic listeners who not only use all of their active listening skills, but also show genuine interest and empathy for the prospect. The average salesperson only uses selective listening while they look for the slightest buying signal so they can pounce in for the sale by telling the prospect all the reasons why they should buy. Telling is not selling. A good rule of thumb is that during a sales interview, the prospect should speak at least 80% of the time. Mistake number 2 is where salespeople allow the buyer to control the sales interview. Once a prospect perceives that you are there to sell them something, they have developed a buyer's process in order to control the conversation. Their process is to protect themselves from being led into a decision they will later regret. It involves learning as much about you and your product or service as they can before they tell you, well, let me think about it. In effect, they look for as much free information as they can get and are willing to spend the time getting it, regardless of whether they would buy from you or not. The risk from this is twofold. First, you may be wasting a lot of time with someone who's not going to buy from you, when you could be spending time with someone else who is ready to buy. Second, you risk giving away information that the buyer can later use with your competitors as leverage for getting a better deal. And why would you ever provide an opportunity for someone to buy from a competitor? While the buyer is always in control of the final decision, it is crucial for the salesperson to be in control of the process. The third mistake in sales is that product knowledge is way too much overrated. Studies have shown that a salesperson's effectiveness often decreases after they have been with a company for some time. There are two possible reasons for this. One is that when they come to work for you, they may bring a portfolio of relationships that they have built over time. If your product or service matches the needs of customers whom have already built a trusting relationship with a salesperson, then it becomes an easy sale for them. But the other reason is that when a salesperson first starts with your company, he or she is not as familiar with the products or services you offer. So, in order to make the sale, they must spend time listening to the prospect so they can understand what their needs and pains are. They don't fall into the trap of talking too much based on all the knowledge they have gained. The sale they make is based on building trust and rapport with a buyer by understanding what the emotional pain and most pressing needs are before moving to satisfy them. Of course, some degree of product knowledge is important, in that your sales team needs to be able to guide their questions in a way that will efficiently qualify or disqualify a prospect. But if they fall into the trap of talking too much for the purpose of telling the prospect everything that is so great about your company's products and services, they will end up losing time and most often the sale as well. Mistake number 4. Price is not the reason for getting or keeping business. True, there are buyers out there who are always shopping for the best, cheapest price possible. But are those the buyers you want to do business with? They will just as quickly jump off your ship for the next deal as they were to do business with you in the first place. The reason successful sales organizations get and keep business is by providing the best value to their customers. This involves building an MVP quality based on relationship and credibility. There are 4 critical components required in order for a transaction to occur between a buyer and a salesperson. Most of your competitors will learn the first 2. Number 1, the prospect must perceive that there is a problem. Number 2, the prospect must possess a willingness to fix it. Your company can differentiate itself by also learning the last 2. Number 3, the prospect must perceive urgency, also known as pain. And number 4, the salesperson must have an MVP quality. The ultimate goal of your sales team is for them to have a higher quality of relationship with your customers, along with a higher level of credibility or trust. By doing so, you won't have to fight so much over price. The 5th mistake is one that a majority of salespeople have a difficult time with. It is in accepting the fact that no is an acceptable response. The sales professionals who attain the greatest levels of success will always go for the no. Why is this a criterion for success? Because by doing so, they will make a more efficient use of their time. If no is the answer that a prospect will eventually end up with, it is much better to get there quickly so you can move on to the next prospect. Now, I'm not saying that a salesperson should literally push a prospect toward a negative response, but they should be willing to accept a no so they can move on. Another component of the buyer's game is that they typically don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So instead of saying no, they will end up with a response along the lines of, "Let me think about it." The salesperson's perspective should be that yes is great, no is completely okay, but the maybes should never be acceptable. When sales projections include the maybes, you'll end up with faulty forecasts. To be an effective hunter-closer, a salesperson should never walk away from a conversation without knowing definitely what and when the next steps will be. And he or she should avoid making any assumptions about what the buyer is thinking. So if it's not a yes or a no, or if the next step in the process isn't clearly defined and mutually agreed upon, the salesperson should probe the situation with infinite curiosity to learn what the buyer is really thinking before making conclusions based on assumptions. We're halfway there. Let's do a recap of the first 5 mistakes. Salespeople talk too much. Salespeople allow the buyer to control the sales interview. Product knowledge is way overrated. Price is not the reason for getting or keeping business. And no is an acceptable response. If you focus on these first 5 by spending time with your salespeople while they are conducting the sales interview, you can make tremendous improvements in the outcome. There are another 5 mistakes that are important as well. The first 3 have to do with your salespeople, and the last 2 have to do with your sales strategy. So let's move on. The 6th mistake that should be avoided is where salespeople fail to uncover true motives for the buyer. Even when urgency and pain is discovered, too often the salesperson will prematurely go for the close. When they do so, they risk losing all of the relationship and credibility built up so far. They also risk wasting additional time with the current prospect when they could be moving on to the next one, and they may end up losing the sale. Whenever an urgent pain is uncovered where your product or service can help, the salesperson should always probe a little deeper, again with infinite curiosity, in order to be certain they understand all of the buyer's motives. They should include questions that probe to discover what the prospect has done so far to fix their need, and how that worked for them. Additional questions could include ones designed to discover who has been involved so far, and who will be involved in any decision they make. The objective is to take the prospect from being well, to being sick, to being critical, before moving to the satisfy step where they will be healed. By avoiding mistake number 6, not only will you be assuring a sale that won't go sour on second thought, but you will be building that MVP quality, showing sincere interest in what the buyer is going through, building a relationship and establishing credibility. Number 7 is when there is a failure to reveal budgets and resources. Unfortunately, way too many salespeople are reluctant to talk about money in an open and candid manner. This may be partly due to our culture, but unless you completely understand the prospect's willingness to spend time and money for fixing their need, the risk of spending too much time with a prospect who eventually says no, or I want to think about it, increases dramatically. Questions should be included in order to establish the prospect's value of the need or pain. How much are they willing to spend, not only in money, but all of their other resources, including time, in order to make the pain go away? And an effective salesperson will probe with additional questions to establish as many of the costs the prospects could experience as possible if the pain continues. By doing so, whenever you get to the price of your product or service, you should be able to establish the value in the mind of the buyer for purchasing it. On the other hand, if you establish early the prospect has an unrealistic expectation of what they are willing to spend, you can walk away without wasting additional time. The 8th mistake is similar to the last 2. Too often, salespeople will fail to gain commitment from the buyer before they give satisfaction. Even though they uncover critical pain and establish that the buyer has sufficient budget and resources, they haven't necessarily received a commitment that the buyer is ready to move now as opposed to sometime later. A question here could be along the lines of, what would happen if nothing is done now? The salesperson should probe the prospect to see what they see as next steps before attempting to close. On the one hand, they may discover that there are other unmet wants or questions that the prospect has and would want to address before making a decision. They may discover that there are other people or processes that need to be involved in the decision process for the buyer, although hopefully this is established early in the sales interview. You always want to spend time with a decision maker, not someone who will end up telling you that you need to talk to someone else and start the process all over. On the other hand, the prospect may go for the close. You know, the most successful sales are ones where the seller never closes the buyer. Rather, the buyer closes the buyer. If the sales interview is handled as well as it can be, you will have the buyer chomping at the bit for wanting to move forward and commit to a purchase. The last 2 mistakes relate to how your company manages its sales program. Mistake number 9 is where there is no systematic sales approach in place, and there aren't any metrics to measure success. Are your revenue goals written down? Do you understand what your sales cycle is? That is, how long it takes typically from the time you begin talking with a prospect until they agree to buy? Do you track your sales effort on a weekly basis? Not just the number of closed sales, but the number of calls, meetings, etc. that are being conducted for ensuring success in sales. Without having a written sales process along with the metrics for measuring its effectiveness, how will you ever know what needs to change if issues develop? Once it is written down, you need to make sure your sales organization is accountable to the process as well as to the results. Think about most, if not all, the other functions that make up your business. Financial records are kept in order to manage profitability and cash flow. Operational processes are written to ensure that your workforce is able to produce efficiently. But for some reason, sales is treated differently. When everything is going good, that's great. But when it falls off, no one knows why. Rather than addressing the process being used, blame is often placed on the economy or the government or anything other than where it should be. The 10th and final crucial mistake is that organizations don't assess their salespeople or their job applicants to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are when it comes to sales. Unlike most professions, there aren't any college degrees for sales. So all that you have to go on is past experience or current perceived aptitude. And too often, an individual's past results are accepted at face value, without any idea for how they achieved them. We have identified 21 competencies for salespeople. I want to share the 4 most important ones to use when assessing your current and future sales employees. They are desire, commitment, outlook, and responsibility or excuse making. If any of these 4 are absent, the potential for performing as an effective hunter-closer is much less. Desire. Successful salespeople are never satisfied with where they are. They are driven to work harder and make more money. Their appetite for increasing their wealth and success is insatiable. How do your people measure up when it comes to their desire? People who lack desire are not motivated to work harder in order to gain more, whether it's more customers for you or more rewards for them. While it is rare to find people in sales who don't have desire, they are out there. Sales positions that do not base compensation mostly on commissions are the ones that attract low desire salespeople. Commitment. This involves an attitude of doing whatever it takes to succeed. Successful salespeople never accept failure and are not afraid of rejection. They are willing to go out of their comfort zone, learn and try new things, and never give up in working toward achieving their desire. People who lack commitment have either already accomplished what they set out to accomplish or probably won't accomplish what they set out to. In either case, they don't presently have a compelling reason to do whatever it takes to succeed. They will avoid doing the things that don't seem comfortable or important and will focus on those activities and behaviors that are enjoyable and comfortable. These salespeople will take the path of least resistance. Outlook. This is the question for whether the glass is half full or half empty. Does your sales team dwell on the challenges presented by this economy, or are they realizing the opportunities that have opened because of it? As your competition falters and folds, the opportunities for increasing your customer base abound. Successful salespeople always have an abundance outlook when it comes to filling their pipeline and increasing their sales results. When people have a poor outlook, it means they don't feel good about some aspect of their life, including but not limited to their job, company, self, home life, financial situation, or physical appearance. While it's normal to see an outlook problem in a candidate, an outlook problem that isn't resolved at the time of hiring is a problem for the entire sales force. If you equate outlook with a contagious disease, then it's safe to assume that within 90 days, everyone on your sales force would have an outlook problem. So it's crucial to be certain that this outlook problem is due to the uncertainty of the candidate's employment status. Responsibility. Do your salespeople take responsibility for their own results or lack thereof? Or do they come up with excuses for why they aren't meeting their sales quotas or achieving growth? In evaluating job applicants, do you probe into their history for taking responsibility and doing whatever is necessary for self-improvement? When people make excuses, They're blaming external sources for their lack of results, their boss, company, competitors, coworkers, etc. Individuals that make excuses won't change or improve until they take responsibility for their results. This means you won't be able to hold them accountable until they stop making excuses, a task that can be easy or difficult depending more on your toughness than upon their compliance. If you are not achieving the results you seek for increasing sales and you want to fix the problem, how do you learn what needs to be fixed without first understanding where it is broken? So I strongly encourage you to look into and use one of the assessment tools that are available out there, or at minimum spend some time assessing your current and future employees on these 4 most critical competencies. There you have it, the 10 most crucial mistakes in sales. If you assess and address all of these potential issues in your sales organization, I promise you will see a tremendous change for the bearer. I hope you've gotten real value from this presentation. Feel free to share it with peers and business colleagues that will also benefit from this information.